Boom! Senator Zach Wahls, my old friend. It is so great to see you, and especially now, things are changing in Iowa. Hi.
Hey, how you doing, Pete? Great to be back.
I'm doing great, and it's great to have you back on the show. And I need a lot of updates. Yesterday, this week, you guys flipped the Senate in Iowa, and Democrats now have control. You used to be the
No. We broke the supermajority. Important distinction. Still a big deal. Not quite flipped overall, but we went from 16 to 17, which is a big deal for reasons I'm happy to explain.
well, it's a big deal for a lot of reasons, and I want to get into it. But first, I just want to catch up with you publicly a little bit because I haven't seen you. We've talked, but since I knew you guys were expecting, but you have become a father, which I think is great because I know you well, and I know you are, and will continue to be a great dad. But how has that changed you? Congrats.
It's amazing, man. I think it's one of those things that obviously lots of people talk about in terms of the transformative experience of parenthood. Um, and for me, it unlocks like a level of emotional depth that you've never quite felt before. I was talking with my wife this is a few weeks ago, and it's like, you know, um, it's just this different. It's just like there's this urgency of how you feel and how that parental love makes you feel about your son or your daughter. That is different, and it's a new experience for me. Um, it's reconnecting me with my faith
Hmm.
in some ways that I wasn't really expecting, and it's just a certain kind of love that is really powerful. I will tell you that I have learned a lot in the last 17 and a half months about how expensive having children is in this state. When I drop my son off at daycare, I am reminded that my childcare costs almost as much as my mortgage. All these tariffs that are out there. You know what is not made in the United States? Car seats. Um, and those have gotten more expensive. Obviously, like a lot of baby clothes, we're buying a lot of our stuff secondhand, so the tariffs haven't been directly affecting that. But it's definitely, and actually, Pete, I'll tell you, I was at coffee with a buddy of mine from high school who I hadn't seen in several years. He just moved back to Des Moines, conservative Republican, very different politics than me. But we were having coffee, and this was in Des Moines a few weeks ago, and he said, Zach, I get all your emails and all your text messages and stuff, and like I disagree with you on a lot. But I'll tell you, the stuff you have out there about taking on the corruption and standing up to the establishment, I like that a lot.
Hmm.
And then he segued to talking about how he and his wife want to start a family, but it's so damn expensive right now. Like they can't
Yeah.
afford childcare on their current, paychecks. And so it's like this is an issue that cuts across party lines completely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's such an expensive thing, and even in Iowa, you're talking about. I mean, Val and I got priced out of Manhattan back in 2005 because we couldn't afford pre-K,
Right.
and it was much less childcare you can talk about as you were. The other thing about having a kid is, I know it's going to sound jarring to say. I don't know how the experience has been for you, but I know like you have to worry about a thing in a way you never worried before. You'd never worry. You learn pretty quick they're durable, but you worry about them dying, getting sick,
Yeah.
ill, or dying all the time. And I hate to ask you that, but I got to ask you, like, because I was talking to my 17-year-old daughter. She's grown up in an America where she's been worried that someone's going to come in her school and shoot her.
Mhm.
When you saw yesterday's shooting not too far from where you are in Iowa yesterday in Minnesota, how much do you and your wife, have to think about the kind of violence in America with violence, gun violence being the leading cause of death of children? You don't want to think that that's going to happen in your community, but that's what everybody says in almost every community in America, and then it happens. What were your thoughts yesterday?
Well, look, I mean, it's shocking, and I have to be honest, Pete. I have not sat down and read the full coverage just yet. But saw the headlines and got the news alerts about it, obviously. And it the fact that you're, as you just said, right, it's the leading cause of death for American children today. When I was growing up, I remember I did maybe one active shooter drill when I was in elementary school. And I don't think we even knew that's what it was at the time, right? It was a drill, but like we weren't totally sure. In living in Iowa, like you do tornado drills a lot. But now that's just like an expected, right, part of American childhood. And I don't think it doesn't have to be this way, right? And I don't think that we should accept that this is how it is. And I think that even people who support Second Amendment rights and the ability of Americans to own firearms can agree that we are not on a sustainable course at the moment, and that even though there have been some small improvements at the federal level, there's still a lot more to do, both at the state and federal levels.
Certainly has been a lot more change at the state level and local level than there has been at the federal level. I hate it when people say nothing ever changes, because in fact there's lots of activists who elect almost entirely, unfortunately, Democrats, who vote for policies that make the world a little bit safer, and that matters. I think that matters a lot, and I just don't.
Well, and it goes the other way too. I mean, in Iowa, when I was first elected in 2018, Iowa's gun laws were, probably like middle of the pack to even maybe above average from a gun safety perspective. We're still like a shall issue state when it came to permits for acquiring firearms. But you did have a background check process that was in place for acquiring a permit. You had, cooling off periods, those kinds of things. And over the last 7 years that I've been in the Senate, you've seen Republicans systematically pass legislation that have massively expanded access to firearms, including for, they call it constitutional carry, which basically means no background checks and you can just wherever. Um, and then they also passed a constitutional amendment that, you know, put not just the Second Amendment, the federal Second Amendment, into into the state constitution. They added a strict scrutiny standard, which basically means that, if you do see majorities, and I think they would be bipartisan majorities in the future, that wanted to introduce legislation to, for example, restore background checks, those could be challenged at the court and state court and struck down.
I mean, that's not all. As far as I can tell, a lot has changed in Iowa politics, and as a result of the last few years. What else? I mean, you had that historic anti-abortion law, and the Supreme Court, and now I want to talk with you about what's happening now with this Democrat flipping the Iowa Senate, not flipping it, but breaking the Republican supermajority, I should say. Sorry.
Yep.
Headlines say it like the Guardian says Democrat flips Iowa State Senate. That's why I think I said it. But
State Senate seat, they probably just missed a word.
uh,
Yeah, well, look, it was a huge deal, and for what it's worth, Pete, I think that is an example of how there is a growing anger at the Republican overreach in our state, where you have passed this agenda out of Des Moines that is really not commensurate with where I think most Iowans are on a lot of these individual issues. The Iowa Republican Party has, during the Donald Trump era, been very successful, and I think they've really ridden his coattails. Iowa has always been, maybe not always, but since the '80s for sure, during the farm crisis, a very anti-establishment state, which is why you saw Bill Clinton carry the state twice in '92 and '96, why Barack Obama carried the state twice in '08 and '12. It's why Donald Trump carried the state in '16, '20, and '24. But Republicans during the last 10 years have really ridden Trump's coattails to substantial majorities in the Iowa legislature, as Donald Trump has really changed the politics of rural America, small town America. And I think that the agenda that they have passed, whether it was implementing a private school voucher system, slashing income tax rates for the wealthiest families in our state, or more, has really provoked this backlash. In fact, I'll text you after we get off the horn here, but there was this really interesting video that came out yesterday morning of a Republican county supervisor. So like the board of supervisors in Iowa, there's 99 counties. Each county is a board of supervisors. Republican county supervisor just talking candidly about why he thought Republicans lost this race. And he pointed specifically to the extreme agenda has come out of Des Moines, and the backlash to it, which is why Caitlin Dre flipped this state Senate seat that Donald Trump carried by almost 12 points in 2024. And she won by 10, so like a 21, 22-point swing in a few short months.
it's hard to know any one district's politics in your own state, much less in another. But you just mentioned it. Caitlin Dre is her name. She beat a guy who was a big Trump supporter and kind of conspiracy theorist. Is that right?
Yeah, a 9/11 conspiracy theorist, very far right, compared, abortion to the Holocaust. I mean, and he's like also like a professional Politico operative, basically. And so I wouldn't say that he was a strong candidate, but Caitlin's win was consistent with this pattern that we've seen now in the last 8 months. Iowa legislative Democrats are on a pretty wild streak. We have had 20 plus point over performances in 4 consecutive special elections this year. We flipped a state Senate seat in the eastern part of the state near where I live. In the earlier part of this year, that was a seat that Donald Trump had won by 20 points, and we won it by 4. That was a 25-point swing. Came up a little close in flipping a House seat in southeast Iowa that Trump had carried by 27 points. We lost by 3, another 24-point swing. We held on to a safe Democratic seat with very, very high Democratic performance there. And then obviously Caitlin makes it 4 in a row where we've had this massive, 20 plus point over performance. So I think it's a good testament to how motivated and fired up the Democratic base is. And I think the frustration and kind of demotivation that you're seeing on the Republican side.
So you are running for U.S. Senate now, which
Sure
is real exciting. You reached out to me a while back and told me, and I got very excited and I began to drink, but I would have been drinking even if you hadn't texted me at that time, which means, so I don't think it means any difference. But the bottom line is I was excited, very happy. Coke Zero. Is it zero? Good for you. That's good. You're almost 20 now.
I think it actually tastes the best of any of the various options.
You will always be the age you were when we discovered you in 2011 when you went viral. Like,
yeah, I was 19 as a teenager.
You got famous when you were 19, and so that's where you are permanently an amber to me. So I don't believe that you're older.
I had a lot less gray in my beard when I was 19.
What do you have, 2 in there? Shut up.
Oh,
So
I mean, not as much as you, but definitely a lot more than I did a few years ago.
You could have gone further. I mean, I don't look like a salty sea captain the way you do, but yeah.
Oh, the beard was out of control earlier this year. It was like down to, I was like literally able to stroke the beard, and my team was like, "This is ridiculous."
That'll help you though. Get the conservative vote. They'll think you some burly outdoorsman or something. It shouldn't signal anything. But it is interesting to understand the politics in your state. So you're running for Senate. The current senator who's up for re-election is Joni Ernst. People probably know a little bit about her. She really put her foot in the mouth at a recent town hall when she said that everybody dies sometime or some nonsense. She's got a record of voting, which you can run against, I guess. And there's a new polling out that your campaign apparently put out. So I guess that matters a little bit. But it's polling. So I guess you probably wouldn't have promoted it if you were down, but you're up. You're beating her in this new poll.
Yeah.
The election is over a year away?
Yeah. So the primary election will be in June. And then the general election will be next November.
So yeah, there's some other good candidates that I think are up against. So you're running in this primary. Yeah. It's in June, but tell me, give us your spiel. I mean, this is exciting that you're running for U.S. Senate, because I might be able to come and hang out in your office until you have to tell some young staffer he needs to go now.
Look, we're a long ways away from any of that, but I'll tell you, I obviously saw that comment that Senator Ernst made in June about how we all are going to die when she got asked a question about Republican cuts to Medicaid that she not only voted for. I mean, Joni Ernst was the deciding vote on those Medicaid cuts, which are going to have a huge impact in Iowa and our rural communities. But it's a lot more than that. I mean, Joni Ernst ran 12 years ago. She said she was going to go to Washington. She was going to make them squeal. She was going to take on the establishment. But the reality is she's become a huge part of the problem that she said she'd solve. And so our campaign, what we're hearing, and Pete, we've been to, I think, over 25 counties at this point. What we are hearing from people, Iowa's economy is really taking it on the chin right now. We've fallen to 48th in personal income, 49th in state GDP. Our ag economy is really hurting from these tariffs, both in terms of the price of commodities as well as the input costs for things like fertilizer. And I will also just say, that now adding $4.5 trillion to the national debt to give billionaires a huge tax cut is not popular. I mean, we have not just Democrats, but independents and Republicans coming out to our town halls that we're hosting. And when we ask, and I do this at every event, how many people here thought billionaires needed another tax cut? Haven't had a single hand go up yet, right? So there's real anger that they're getting taken care of, but the costs are still high, are not coming down. And if anything, the budget, that they passed is going to make a lot of those worse, not better. And then, the second thing is, we are talking a lot about the corruption in our system, the fact that you have corporate influence, all of this money funding. Joni Ernst is one of the worst. Look at all the abilities of billionaires, whether it's people like Elon Musk or many, many others on the Republican side, some on the Democratic side too, who are funding these campaigns to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. People are angry about that, and they understand there is a connection between the corporate influence and corruption and the fact that costs aren't coming down, that the economy continues to work great for the people at the very top, but not for the rest of us. So when we talk about things like overturning Citizens United, we talk about passing common sense term limits because Iowans understand that rotating the crops is good for the soil. So you better believe it's good for our politicians too. And finally, banning the shameful practice of members of Congress in the House and the Senate from trading stocks on inside information and getting rich while passing laws that hurt their constituents. These are not democratic issues. These are 80-20 issues across the entire electorate. And people are really responding to that. And that the fact that we're talking about that connection between the broken economy and the political corruption.
One of the things about Senator Joni Ernst that I think should matter. I don't know if it'll matter to Iowa voters that much, but I mean, I paid close attention to it because I paid close attention to the issue of sexual assault. She worked with Democrats. She's a survivor of sexual assault, very, very vocal about it. She worked with Democrats like Kirsten Gillibrand to help change the atmosphere and the culture in the military. She's also a veteran. And I thought that was great. I thought that was great that Senator Joni Ernst was working with others to fight back and to change the culture and to change laws against sexual assault. And then she voted to support Pete Hegseth, and she supported Donald Trump, and I believe RFK. None of these guys have a good reputation with women, and I am being very generous when I say that. For her to vote for Hegseth, which I guess was a tough vote for her, was tragic. I mean, is that something that you think is worth talking about to Iowa voters?
I mean, look, I think the Pete Hegseth one in particular. So not only was Pete Hegseth have these allegations against him, he's also vocally said that he does not support women in combat roles. Joni Ernst is the first female combat veteran in the U.S. Senate.
He doesn't support, his pastor doesn't support women voting.
Well, I saw that story. I haven't read it personally, so I don't want to comment on that until I have a chance to read it more. But look, there is a growing fringe group within the right wing that is, they call it household voting, I think, of like, which is insane. I mean, that's completely beyond the pale.
Just to be clear, it's the idea that what they believe Doug Wilson, who is Hegseth's pastor, and people should go listen to Heath Drusen's podcast about this NPR podcast about Musco, Idaho, and Doug Wilson, rather, I believe his name is, and Zach was just saying it, trying to just real quick. It's important people know household voting is that they believe each household should get a vote, which is their way of saying men should get a vote. And if women want to have a say, they can. But in the end, it's the men who votes. That's what that is. Anyway,
awful. And look, I think if Joni Ernst had the courage of her convictions to vote against Pete Hegseth, I think she would frankly be a much more formidable opponent because it would show that she still had some level of independence and a willingness to put her constituents before her party politics. But if anything, it's exactly the opposite now. She, had these concerns, which she expressed. We all found out a few short months later how well-founded those concerns were when he started texting the war plans to Jeffrey from the Atlantic. And the fact that now, we can all see how incompetent that every single day he's in that office, it jeopardizes the safety of our men and women in uniform. And then she's also just completely gone along with the rest of the agenda that is hurting Iowa. Another big thing too is they ended in the Big Beautiful Bill these investments in clean energy, which is huge in Iowa. So 65% of our electricity comes from wind, and we have all these new data centers coming online for AI stuff. And if they don't have the ability to rapidly scale wind and solar in this state, which is the cheapest form of electricity, the average Iowa household is going to see our energy bill go up $400 to $500 a year as a result of ending those direct investments, which totally wipes out for a lot of households any benefit of extending the middle class, working class tax cuts.
That is a very good point that all Iowa voters and people should know is coming. These subsidies are ending. I mean, there was this wind project off Rhode Island, I forget the name of it, that was like almost $1 billion and almost done, and they just canceled it. It's crazy what they are doing in every possible way. Do you think that the midterm elections are going to be free and fair, Zach? Or how worried are you about democracy for Iowa, much less the country?
Yeah. So look, I do think that they will be. I understand, and I hear from folks, at events and sometimes, online about concern around that topic. We've had 4 straight special elections here in the state legislature. We've had them for some other county offices. At the Iowa level, I mean, these elections, at least in Iowa, are run by county auditors. So, I mean, you're talking about a very, very low level of government, right? The ability of the Trump White House to affect them is actually relatively slim. And then all of this stuff is very carefully documented at every stage. You go from the county, from the precinct level to the county to the state. And so, they have all of that paper trail, right? So from my perspective, it's not something that we are worried about here in the state, but it is a concern. And it's not just about elections; it's about all kinds of other things in terms of how they're consolidating power in the executive branch. And look, I think that's a concern that goes back not just to this president. I think that you've seen over time the steady concentration of power in the executive branch, but Trump has obviously taken it to a new level. And I do think that you need Congress to reassert its authority.
So you're running for U.S. Senate. Joni Ernst has the seat right now. Have you met her? Do you have any relationship with her?
Yeah, I've met her at a few events, in my capacity as a state senator. We don't text or anything. But, I'll tell you, I think that she's very vulnerable. And I would also tell your audience, I mean, Iowa is an imperative state in trying to win a Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate this cycle. There's no credible path to 51 Democratic Senate seats. And you need 51 because J.D. Vance can break the tie in 50-50. So you've got a couple of defensive seats in, Michigan, New Hampshire, Georgia. You've got Maine and North Carolina as potential pickup opportunities, but that only gets you to 49. To get to 51, you need Sherrod Brown in Ohio. You need me in Iowa. Texas and Florida, I don't think are going to be competitive this cycle. Maybe Dan Osborne has a shot in Nebraska. Kansas is up. Kansas hasn't sent a Democrat to the U.S. Senate since 1932. Sounds like maybe Mary Peltola is running for governor instead of Senate. So I think Iowa is one of those primo states for us. And then I would also just say that from my perspective, Joni is uniquely vulnerable among the Republican incumbents. In that poll that you mentioned earlier, not only were we the strongest Democratic candidate running against her, we were winning independents 51-33. I was even carrying 7% of Donald Trump's 2024 voters who were willing to give a Democrat another look. And critically, there is a 17-point difference between Donald Trump's approval rating and Joni Ernst's approval rating. She is running substantially behind Donald Trump, and she's very, very vulnerable, and we can beat her. And if any of your listeners want to support the campaign, they can go to ZachWahls.com. We would love to have them chip in a couple bucks.
ZachWahls.com to donate, because it is going to be a lot of money, because as you just said, a lot of eyes are going to be on the United States Senate. So money's going to be pouring in and they're going to try to destroy you if you become, maybe even earlier, if you don't win the primary, and it looks like you're going to win, they're going to come after you no matter what. Everybody's going to find out that you have two moms, which is going to be shocking. I just read that in Wikipedia, had I known.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's this little funny thing of like, I've been in the public eye for most of my adult life, which is a unusual thing. And look, we're just trying to run the campaign the same way I've handled my work in the legislature, the same way that I was an advocate for my family. And that's by having the courage to speak to our convictions, meet people where they are, engage in, the art and the craft of persuasion, and try to chart a better vision for the future of our state, one where people can actually work hard, make a decent living, get ahead, retire with security and dignity, leave something better for their kids, their grandkids. And that's the Iowa that I believe in. That's the future that Chloe and I want for our son. And I think that's the Iowa that our state deserves.
What is your, you mentioned that you do better with, I think, Republicans or those who voted for Trump than the people that you're running against in the primary there. Why? What is your appeal? What is your pitch? Like, what happens when you do meet a Trump voter, when you're knocking doors or you're out anywhere in Iowa, which you are a lot? Like, how does that conversation go? Have you convinced people?
So look, the first thing that you have to do is try to find common ground. And what I'll tell you, Pete, is like, so I think part of the reason our campaign is able to do this is I actually represented two counties that were Obama-Trump counties. They flipped from 2012 to 2016, and I represented those areas for my first 4 years in the Senate. There's been a lot of time in rural Iowa, knocking on a lot of doors in small towns, meeting voters literally on their doorstep, listening to their concerns. And one of the interesting things that I heard about Donald Trump from a lot of folks who voted for him in 2016 was, I don't agree with Donald Trump on every issue, but I believe that he's fighting for me. And now I think that you can debate whether or not that's actually true, but it's an emotional response that a lot of people had to his candidacy. They felt like they were being failed by the pre-Trump status quo, and they wanted to shake things up. And so from our perspective, it's about both understanding the frustration that a lot of voters had with how things were before Trump was elected, understanding that we're not going to when like voters aren't going to agree with us on every issue, and that's okay. If they share our belief that you actually need to have an economy that works better for the middle class and for folks who aren't just in that top 1 or 0.1%, and that we're willing to take on the corruption that we see in both parties, then they're welcome on the team. That has been resonating with people, and I think it's going to continue to resonate as we spread that message more and more across the state. And I also just tell you, I do think that there is some real buyer's remorse too. I think that folks, felt look, a lot of folks felt the squeeze of inflation during the Biden years. They looked at Kamala Harris and they didn't see a meaningful distinction from the first 4 years of the Biden presidency. And you know, they decided that they were willing to go back to Trump because they associated with him with a slightly better economic picture. Now, you and I know that he let COVID rampage through the country, and that created a lot of the economic challenges that the Biden team was trying to solve. But I think that inflation, it was the issue, and Democrats got hammered on it.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're right about that, who knows? It's hard to possibly know, but I think that unfortunately, the only thing that really is going to make a change in terms of elections is economics and the cost of things, and every single indicator looks like the economy is going to get slowly or rapidly worse as a result of a wide range of
Yeah.
choices being made by Trump and Republicans,
And
right?
Pete, in Iowa, that's already happening. I mean, I think that's the thing that I want your listeners to understand. Iowa's in a recession. Our state economy is contracting because of what's happening currently in our ag economy and the impacts of the tariffs on our light manufacturing. And so, like, Iowa is on the bleeding edge of this. But all of those changes that were in the Republican budget, whether it's the Medicaid cuts, the SNAP cuts, adding the clean and energy investments, all of those, it's like tailor made to be negatively bad for Iowa. And again, Joni Ernst didn't just vote for it; she was the deciding vote for it, right? And I think that's where, again, when you talk to some of those Trump voters, it's interesting, right? They understand that he's going to have ideas that are not good for Iowa, but they like support him because they think that he's a change agent. He's making things happen. But what they want is a legislator who will like rein him in when he's doing things that are bad for the state. And right now, Joni Ernst isn't doing that. She's just a rubber stamp, and that's the core problem with her.
How much of an issue is the mass deportations? There are a lot of people who, believe that the majority of undocumented people here were also criminals because they were told that by their leaders over and over and over. I don't have a lot of patience for those people because we all know people who we suspect are undocumented, and anybody living or working around a farm should know better. And I wonder, if they're now learning in Iowa, like we are in rural areas across the country, that those hardworking people at the farm up the street, guess what? They were undocumented, and now there's no one to work the farm. I'm not sure if that issue is hit there, but when it does hit, it would seem that a lot of people are like, no, these are the good ones.
Yeah. So here's what I'd say. You kind of touched on this a little bit. What a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 heard was that he was only going to deport the bad guys, the
Yeah.
criminals, the people who are doing violent crimes, right, or whatever. And even though I think you and I probably both understood that they were going to be deporting folks who may be here illegally, but who are otherwise not violating laws, they're working, they're,
It's like
um,
they're deporting guys now. Yeah, I just read it. I mean, every hour there's a different headline, but yeah, they're deporting someone who is technically illegal here illegally. It's like a misdemeanor, but they're deporting a guy who came here legally but overstated his visa, but literally deported him while he was fighting a fire. They pulled guys off the line yesterday and okay, he's here illegally, but he's fighting a fire right now. If you could just let him do his job, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, the metaphor there's obviously a little on the nose. But I will tell you, in the ag economy in particular, I mean, you're talking about a substantial part of the workforce that if this mass deportation comes fully through Iowa, and it's not just like on the farm, it's in the meat packing plants and
Right.
livestock processing industry. And look, it's construction, it's hospitality. I mean, there's a lot of different sectors that are going to be hit hard. And by the way, it's not just people who are here, without papers or who are here illegally. It's people who have legal protected status. There is a meatpacking plant down in Ottumwa, which is a community in south central, southeast Iowa, that had 200 employees who were here with temporary protected status, working, gainfully employed, here legally, had that TPS revoked by the administration, their order to self-deport. And like no one's happy about this. You're talking about 200 employees. You're talking about 67 mortgages. You're talking about children. You're talking about family members. You're talking about people who are contributing to their community economically, gone on a whim. And I think that there are a lot of people who heard what Trump said, who believed it in 2024, and are seeing that the actions are not matching up to the language beforehand. And again, I have yet to meet somebody in rural or small town Iowa who's like happy about the idea of mass deportations coming through our state. Because Pete, without immigration, our state would be declining in population rather than just very, very slowly increasing.
That'll be really interesting to see if that changes as things go on and as you continue to campaign statewide, not just in the district that you're representing as a state senator, but you're now campaigning. I'm guessing all over the state, because to win that seat, everybody gets a shot at a vote.
It is a 99 county state. It is a big state. And what we have seen from previous Democratic campaigns, Barack Obama did this exceptionally well in 2008 and in 2012, is that if you can build a grassroots, on the ground, volunteer army, you can have these conversations with people face to face. You can break through concerns. You can actually channel some of that frustration that's out there into some positive political change. That is exactly what we are trying to do. We were the first campaign to receive grassroots support from donors in all 99 of Iowa's counties. And in fact, our 99th county donor was actually a registered Republican who is a veteran from Vietnam and was so disgusted with Senator Ernst's actions, supporting the 80,000 cuts to the VA, voting against the PACT Act when it was in front of the Senate, that he said that he was ready to vote for our campaign and reach across the aisle because he was just sick to death of what's happening in DC right now. And it's stories like this all over the state that are going to make it possible for us to be competitive and to win this election.
Shout out to our mutual friend, Mark Nolte, and shout out to Kim Nyborg, who is a longtime listener and is watching right now in Iowa. I'm sure she's going to support you in all the ways. I wish you the best of luck, my friend. I'll talk to you anytime, as always, across this campaign. ZachWahls.com. Any final thoughts? Did you want to pay me?
No, look, Kim, I appreciate your watching, and I hope that we're able to win your vote both in our primary and in our general election. If you want to get involved, we are looking for volunteers to help us gather petition signatures in all 99 counties. We got to get on the ballot. And if you're listening to this and you like what you've heard, even $5, $10, $15, $25, it all goes a long way. Pete, we're not taking a dime of corporate PAC money because we said if you want to take on the political corruption, you got to lead by example. And so we are depending on grassroots donors who are like the folks who are listening to help make sure that we have the resources to go up against Joni and her $3 million war chest. We're off to a good start, but we need more.
Hopefully you will get it, my friend. It's a very expensive thing to do to run a U.S. Senate campaign, and a lot of money is going to be pouring in there, I'm sure, especially on the other side, that corporate PAC money. They do not have the same stance. They'll take money from anyone. Who's this from? Putin? Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Look, Joni Ernst said that she was going to go to Washington and make him squeal, right? That was her whole thing. You look at her record, we've gone in totally the wrong direction. So I'd say she's all squeal, no bacon.
Oh, wow. I didn't see it coming. Zach, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you, and I will talk to you soon.
See you again soon. Thanks, Pete.
All right. There he goes. Stay there, Zach. I'll say goodbye, but I just wanted to let everybody watching live know I appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back in about 20 minutes, 5 p.m. East, which is the only time zone that matters, to talk with Rob Davidson, who is an ER physician and an advocate about the latest moves by our brain-worn, eaten Health and Human Services Secretary. I'll talk to you later.